Anticipation is an incredibly important principle of animation to study. So anticipation is the movement that sells an action before it actually happens. So with this character who's jumping up and down, the moment where the character squats down, that's the anticipation of the actual jump. The character who's pushing on the box, the moment where that character kind of winds back, that's the anticipation to the movement before he pushes forward. So follow through and overlapping action. Um, if you think of follow through, that would be, if the ball that's moving here is the driving force, the feather that's attached to the top of it, that that creates follow through. So as the driving force moves, the feather reacts to the movement. So if you look at the base of the feather keeps with the speed of the ball, but the tip of the feather slightly drags behind, and then it's going to eventually catch up to the ball as it slows down. Then it's going to overshoot, recoil, um, overshoot, and then recoil back. If you think of overlapping action, that's when you have two different limbs moving at the same time, or different actions moving at the same time, but they're stopping and starting at different times. So with the character who's jumping, if you notice, the arms are slightly delayed. They're not all moving at the same time. So one slightly moves at a different speed than the other arm. Same with the legs, and same with the head. Um, if everything was to move at the same time in the same speeds, that would be called twinning, and that's and you want to usually avoid that in animation. You always want to kind of offset when limbs move, just to add believability to your animations. The next principle is arcs. So pretty much everything in nature moves on an arc. So if you look at the pendulum swinging here, it moves on an arc. If you think about how your arms move or your legs move, all of those things moves on arcs. A lot of the actions that we take um, are generated by arcs. Typically, when there's not an arc and it's just a straight movement, that's whenever you're trying to convey force or some kind of powerful movement, or you're trying to mimic something that's mechanical. But for the most part, the way you move, the way you move as a character, the way objects move, if they're breathing characters or alive, or they're even if they're just falling objects, they're likely going to be falling or moving on some kind of arc. Secondary action is it's an action that supports the primary action. So if you look at these two drawings here, the the walking is the primary action. The secondary action is the arms that are swinging back and forth, but they're swinging in sort of an angry way. So that to show that this character is angry and he's marching forward, the way those arms swing is the secondary action to the primary action of the character walking. Um, so again, secondary action it supports the primary action, but it also helps add a bit more to the character. So another example could be, as he's walking here, he could be shaking his head back and forth as well. That would be a secondary action to the primary action of walking. So that should not be confused, though, with the idea of secondary animation. So they look similar because they both use the word secondary, but they're actually different. Secondary animation really it really is closer to follow through. So it's the movement that is dependent on something else. So again, the example of the feather that's being attached to the ball, as the ball moves, the ball is the driving force. The feather then has to it'll delay behind the movement and then eventually catch up to it.